do that now.
Oh.
Progress.
Oh, she looks great.
27 whole people.
That was my daughter.
That's your daughter?
Yeah, she just said 27 whole people.
Pretty good, though.
Gary.
Should I begin? Okay. So welcome, and thanks for being here to celebrate the launch of Elizabeth Sylvia's wonderful collection of poetry, None But Witches, poems on Shakespeare's women. I'm Paul Ganeka, for those of you that don't know me. And I have been serving as editor and publisher of 3 Mile Harbor Press since 2014, when Ann Catcher, its founding editor, passed away. Since 2014, we have been running an annual poetry contest leading to publication, and have been fortunate in bringing out terrific books by Marisol Bacta, M.L. Brown, Jordan Smith, and Nathaniel Beck. Elizabeth is our 5th contest winner, and we are thrilled to have her part of the 3 Mile Harbor family. A word about Elizabeth, for those of you that don't know her. She lives in Mattapoisett, Massachusetts, and teaches at Bourne High School. None But Witches, her first book, came about when she committed herself to reading all of Shakespeare's plays in a single year. In doing so, she found herself focusing on women characters, sensing they had more to say than the lines that they had been given. Thus began poems written to them, for them, and as them, alongside poems that speak directly about women's lives and her own life. This is a wonderful book, smart, perspective, moving, erudite, and sometimes downright funny. And lo and behold, it is available for sale right now at 3mileharborpress.com. Hint, hint, hint. Some logistical points. We're going to have a Q&A after Elizabeth's finished with the reading, and you can raise your little hand, and Paul Latour, our text master here, will call on you. Other than that, please join me in welcoming Elizabeth Sylvia to the stage, and None But Witches.
Thank you all so much for being here. It's a very witchy weather out here in Mattapoisett for sure, with lots of wind and that spooky October feel. So I think this is a great day. Before I start reading, I wanted to say thank you so much to Paul Janega and 3 Mile Harbor Press and Pamela and Paul Latour as well, who's the tech wizard here, for sponsoring this and also for choosing my book, which has been such a surprising and wonderful experience for me. So thank you very much. And also to some of the faces in the crowd who helped me get this book to where it is, my friends in the Mattapoisett Poetry Group, and my wonderful blurbers, Julie, who I can see on my screen right now, and David and Cindy and Josephine and Megan. That it was honestly one of the worst parts of publishing a book is the moment when you have to ask people if they'd like to read your book and say nice things about it. And all of these people were so generous. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to see you here. I'm going to start this reading with 2 poems that kind of bookended my experience of reading Shakespeare. One is from when I was about 1/3 of the way through the plays, and then the next one I wrote when I was done with them. And I think they give an overview to how I developed in my relationship with Shakespeare as I read. The first is called Shakespeare's Women. It's the opening poem of the book. Shakespeare's Women. I used to believe the men who told me Shakespeare was remarkable for making female characters who were as round as men. I don't believe that anymore. Instead, I think he wrote as he could write. What intelligence he casts into Juliet or Portia, just his own maleness animating them. It doesn't matter, finally, if they are witty or can solve a vexing problem. All they do is orbit, casting here and there reflected light. And when they light the path, it is a man's path they light. If they should darken it, it is the darkness of the path that worries us, and not the way their face has disappeared. So ultimately, that was an uncharitable view, and I retracted that position with a poem called Palinode, Shakespeare's Women. A palinode is actually a poem where you say I was wrong about something that I said before. Palinode, Shakespeare's Women. If you watch a lot of TV, especially critically acclaimed, you might come to suspect that a woman is a pair of tits attached to broken, a hurt circuit flipped again and again. It's like we get written into believing we are the worst thing that ever happened to us. So I love how the women in Shakespeare always say exactly what they think is true and are never only watery bags of damage about to burst all over the scene. When horrible things have been done to them, they want revenge, but not because vengeance is the taste trauma leaves flowering in their mouths. Revenge is the word men use for restoration, for imagining justice in this world. In the comedies, they get their due, and all returns to harmony. And when disaster ends in tragedy, the women forge on through blood, witnessing and roaring that we are all more than would be made of us. Okay, it's kind of hard to know how to pace yourself in the silence, so I'm trying not to rush. The next poem that I would like to read was inspired by an early history of Shakespeare's called King John. It's full of battles and fighting, and it has a former queen named Constance in it. In this scene, she she comes on the scene and her son has just been killed. Her life is in shambles. She's absolutely destroyed. And she has pulled all of her hair down. And she's yelling at these men that this world is over. And they keep saying, could you put your hair up though? Could you put your hair up? And I thought, oh, Shakespeare, you're talking about tone policing in the 1600s here. So this poem is for Constance. Unbind. Run into the marketplace with me, mothers of this world, for I have seen you weeping at the dry-edged river and wading from the boats, dead children in your arms. Run into the marketplace with me, mother, madre, mama, mater, mutter, mater, mama, 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 and we will take the pins out from our scalps and shake our heads and fill our silenced mouths with hair. Run in your bared feet to the marketplace with me, where we can beat the drums of grief until we open fissures in the earth that swallow princes as they draw the lines our children cannot cross. Flood the marketplace with hair of snakes and words that cannot be choked back. Shatter and rage and stomp until the maps curl up in fists of ash, because our hair makes fire of the wind, and all around us, knots are come undone, and birth instead of death is thundering. It's nice to see everybody's little faces. Thank you. The next poem I will read is called Ringed. And this is a poem that was inspired by two gentlemen of Verona, which I think is not put on very often, but everything you need to know about the poem, about the play, is actually in this poem. It's kind of a summary of the play, but it's a comedy. It's a romantic comedy, of course, about lovers who are never matched up quite right. And it's called Ringed. The epigraph is, all that was mine in Sylvia, I give thee, from two gentlemen of Verona. How to make a woman mute. Give her to your friend, like the object of affection she always was. In Shakespeare, lovers trade rings of promises, each the licked fingerprint of a beloved, an arrow to the eye of the faithless. Turn the ring sideways, and it shows the hollow of a lover's heart, the space his finger forgets to occupy once that slim first vow is out of sight. There are two women in two gentlemen, and one ring passed between them. Julia gives it to her love, but he offers it to Sylvia, who loves his friend instead. When Sylvia won't take the ring, her lover proffers Sylvia's whole self instead. Sylvia never speaks a word again in the whole play. Her mouth an empty O, her body a space ready for slipping on. In comedy, men bound without rebound, and women, knowing love must be a secret or a shame, go on holding, strung around their neck or deep in pocket, the ring of remembrance, the empty memento.
Do you have any extra books?
I started writing this book in 2018, and I have to say that I had a friend who said that when her partner read it, he asked if I was okay afterwards. And I said, I felt like you should ask Shakespeare if he's okay, because why is he putting these women through all of these things all the time? That like, and I think that we just love to see women suffering in our media, and that's lasted for 400 years. But I also have to say that in 2018, when I was writing this, it was also the height of the Me Too movement. And that was probably also pushing a lot of my feelings as I was reading Shakespeare and feeling like we were continuing to take a lot of pleasure in women's pain. The next poem I'm going to write is called Conceal Me What I Am. It takes its title from Twelfth Night, which is one of Shakespeare's cross-dressing comedies. One of the main characters, Viola, is shipwrecked. And as she comes on shore after the shipwreck, she decides to wear men's clothing as a way of protecting herself now that she's alone in the world. I think that my friend who was with me when the incident in this poem happened is here, so she can attest that this is based on a true story. Conceal me what I am. When I put on my jeans in the morning, I wonder what it must have been like the moment Viola took the captain's hand, who could have sold her for the price of the wreck her presence surely caused, and asked him for the safe passage of men's clothes. Not a person thinks about her crisscrossing Illyria in the service of her master's goals. I go out every day, expecting to be seen, not to be seen, my little horse's legs ferrying me about my way, and most of the men of the world kept at kicking distance. In June, in Paris, in a dress, I still roiled when 3 dumb delinquents, cops on their tails, ran out the metro gate I'd opened with my ticket. Dumb as them, I guess. I threw my whole body up against theirs, but couldn't make the automated gate before it shut. And after they booked off, another man came up demanding why I would do such a thing. My face was red with shame that I couldn't untangle French words from English ones to tell him to go fuck himself. Because even if I have enough money for 100 tickets, I paid for this one, this open door. My mouth corseted by rage and sheepish, seeing the shocked white O of my friend's face, who will later say, it was $1, and who I know will be right. But I don't want to go everywhere in this world costumed in a woman's skin, even if that means trying to knee some smirking punk in the balls over $1. The next one I'll read, I think, continues that theme of how we're perceived versus how we want to be understood. It's called Such Honesties. And the epigraph comes from the Merry Wives of Windsor. He hath studied her well and translated her will out of honesty into English. I love that idea that English is a translation of your honesty, that just as a poet, right? Like, what a terrible thing to believe, that we're all always lying when we're speaking in English. Such honesties. Maybe I was born with a pocket dictionary of honesty in my chest and a knot under my tongue. Maybe my mother knew by the way I suckled that I'd cut or be cut. And maybe she didn't want to sleep with one eye on the door, waiting for Alexander to untie me. So she snipped that extra fillet and filled my mouth with blood. I couldn't tell from milk. When you don't know tears from food, you know you are born a girl. Maybe that dictionary kept on thumping through 1,000 sets of monkey bars and all the doors of the grammar school on the green hill, under the sky crammed with clouds. And I read story after story about girls who'd been enchanted so that toads fell out of their lips. A witching freedom from the faithless way language bends in the hearer's ear, quite beyond my own aired will. How's everybody doing? Doing all right? Okay. The next poem I'd like to read is the first poem that was published from this book. When it was still, it wasn't even conceived of as a book at this point. It was just a bunch of reactions to the plays that I'd been reading, because I've always sort of felt that when you want to talk about something, but you don't have anybody to talk to, you can write a poem. That's what poems do. They have the conversations that you can't find anyone to have with you. This poem's called Nell's Ode. It was inspired by Nell, who is a character who never appears in Shakespeare's Comedy of Errors. She's a kitchen maid, and she's the wife of one of the separated at birth twins in a Comedy of Errors. She never comes on screen, but she is described in great detail. She's very fat, and they take a huge pleasure in making fun of her and talking about her as if she was a world. Yeah, Antipholus says about her, she is spherical like a globe. I could find out countries in her. And it's very mean, but this is what I think Nell would say back. Nell's Ode. All that is great in me might be made little by a word, but I will spin you a tale that brings you in again. For every orb is an icon, and every kitchen an abattoir birthing appetites. You name, but in the kitchen, fire is the force worth knowing. I am swart as the earth's crust, soot as the banked embers, hot as a devil's dam inside, just like this mantled world. And I will swallow you in me until the map lines of your life are lost. By me, you are a stranger made a woman's man, uncertain to himself within the wheel, until you turn, but just as I turn toward you and away, as if you ever could stop burying in me desires that I raise in you. Here's one, since that was a little on the sexy side, here's one I wrote for my husband, who has endured with me many weekday mornings of comedy and terror. This poem's called Comic Interlude. It's just about the slapstick of everyday life. No Shakespeare knowledge required. Comic Interlude. I like the moment when you come in loaded with the soup tureen best, as though we owned a gilded pot with a peacock lid large enough for 40 entremets, and on a Tuesday. Unlike you, I have an excellent view of the banana peel. Here we are, 2 line drawings on wheels passing one another. That's how every domestic starts. But you've loosed a teacup pig in the living room, and she's declared revolution on the sofa cushions, overthrowing them and trampling their bourgeois ideologies. Meanwhile, the atomic clock of every school day morning counts down with its deafening roar. We both scream against its wind, but our children place their slow, cool hands against the glass of our haste, which they see through a fairy's mirror. I am trying so hard to get you to see things my way, and your homunculus crosses our stage playing a wooden flute. I am reminded we will never die in a war. I am reminded that clean water runs over us more often than rain. I am reminded that our mattress is soft with affluence, that every disaster here is of our own making. Take my skull up again in your hands. I can see the notes popping up, and I want to say how much I appreciate them. This will be my last one, I think. And I figured since it's October, and I feel that it's been a bit of a bait and switch because there haven't actually been any poems about witches. And there really aren't a lot of witches in Shakespeare. There's just a lot of women who are accused of being witches. So there aren't a lot of poems about being a witch in the book, really. But I feel that we should all embrace our inner witchy power, you know, the idea that we can use our magical influence on the world. However, I decided I would close with a very Halloweeny love poem. It's called Words from a Head, and it is written from the perspective of the severed head of Queen Margaret's lover in Henry VI, which is sent to her after his death, and then she carries it around in a basket with her wherever she goes. And I thought, that's love. Words from a head. How long did I lie pooling in my life before you brought me to your lips? There was a moment I rolled away from you and the breathing. The dark eye of my neck burst open on the block, turned suddenly upward. You couldn't have held me then, hot and slick as I was in my own blood. Let another have washed me and brought me to you. Now I am dead. No one can whisper anymore about how I loved you, for you take me everywhere. And I am your witness-made memory. I teem with your ecstasy and rage. Your love rattles the chewed rubber of my brain. Wherever you go, I feel you holding me like the muscle that wraps each sacred bone to the body. So beautiful and close, and only in this world.
Why don't we all give it up for this beautiful set before we let her close out with some closing comments, and then we get to Q&A. Why don't we give it up?
Pretty great. Absolutely great.
Okay. Thank you so much to everybody for turning out for this. I really appreciate seeing every one of your beautiful faces on my giant Zoom box. It really means a lot to me that you decided to spend part of your weekend with me. I appreciate it so much. And again, Paul and everybody at 3 Mile Harbor, thank you so much for hosting this for me. And all the compliments. Thank you.
Yeah, so the beautiful thing that we're gonna get to do, because you all left such wonderful comments and feedback, I'm gonna save the chat and pass it on to Elizabeth so she has that in posterity forever. And now we're gonna begin our question and answer portion. So I will ask if you all want to ask a live question, which means directly to the author. Under reactions, you can do click reactions and then raise hand. And as the hands pop up, it'll form a queue, and then I'll unmute you, and you can either have a conversation or ask your question and wait for Elizabeth to respond. And if not, you can always put questions directly in the chat also. You can either DM them to me or just in general, and we'll get to those as well. But I am going to give priority to the folks raising hands. And if you don't know how to use the raise hand feature, because also, you know, Zoom is hard sometimes, you can just physically raise a hand, and as I walk, I will make a list of those doing it analog style, old school style. So I believe I'm going to unmute Heidi. Well, Heidi's already unmuted, so go ahead, Heidi. You can start us off.
Wow, Elizabeth, you did such a great job. You were perfect. Flawless reading, so way to go.
Look at
But
this
I was just
car.
wondering,
Beautiful.
I was wondering if you were going to read and to dissect any of your book poems on your podcast. I want to talk about this.
Oh,
Good question.
that is a horrible question. I actually am very excited to make a couple new episodes of my podcast next weekend. I have that on my schedule. I have not updated it in a very long time, as I've been very busy trying to be a good author and spread the word about None But Witches. I would rather, you know, my podcast is a fan podcast, and I want it to be about poems that I love that were written by other people. So no.
No.
Okay, so so long answer short. Yeah. So we're gonna move on next, and Jeffrey, you're up.
Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing this. I'm so glad I came on. I don't think you can see my photo. I don't know if you can or not, because I'm having troubles, but it was just very inspiring. You could feel the woman's pain a lot in the poetry. And two images come to my mind. It's like Flight of Dove and Cut of Heart. And just thank you so much for sharing. It was very inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You know, I felt really strange about sending this book out after I first read it, because I thought, I'm not a Shakespeare scholar. I'm just a person who read a lot of plays. And I wasn't sure that I had the authority to write a book that was inspired by Shakespeare because of that. And I kind of always want to say to people, you know, I wrote this book out of passion and interest in fantasy, and not from a perspective of professionalism or real deep knowledge of Shakespeare. And I think it's wonderful when other people do that, even though I felt nervous about doing it myself, because I feel like we should all run head first into our passions.
Yeah, and I love that idea. Just reckless abandon into your passion. So we're gonna bring up next Pamela.
I want to ask you, how long did it take you to write your book of poems, like from beginning to end?
Well,
including revision.
I started writing the poems in the beginning of 2018, which was the year I made it my New Year's resolution to read all of Shakespeare's plays. It actually took me 2 years to read all of the plays. So I didn't not meet my resolution, but I worked on, pretty much from January of 2018 until I was forced to turn the book in the spring of this year, I was still working on it. But most of the poems were written 2018 through the end of 2020. So 3 years of drafts and then a year of revision.
As Paul wrote, bravo. It reads so well.
Yes.
And then I really loved until I was forced to turn the book in. I'm like, feel that.
And even now I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I should change
Would we get anything done if not for deadlines, right? Coming up next is Wendy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a wonderful reading, and I loved how you introduced the poems too, and really admire your meticulous notes in the book, which just, is so great to refer to as I'm reading them. And I loved your idea of the palinode and thinking about how reflection and more reading changes our initial attitudes. And I wonder, as you wrote the poems and continued to read Shakespeare, did you get, how else did your attitude change? Did you get angrier and angrier, or all kinds of moods, or did you come to understand Shakespeare in the context of his world? And then part two to that question is, when you order the poems in the book, do they tend to fall in the sequence in which you originally wrote them, or did you really reshuffle them to make a different kind of arc?
Okay, so those are two big questions. I think one of the things that's interesting, so when I read the plays, I read them from my Oxford Complete Shakespeare that my parents gave me when I was 16 years old. And they're organized chronologically in that book. And so I read them chronologically. And one of the things that's interesting, I think, from reading them chronologically is that in the first book, in the first plays, there are so many mothers, and Shakespeare is just awful to mothers, like not individually terrible to them, but if there is a mother, she is going to lose a child, so as a mother myself, I had a lot of frustration and towards that, like, why do all these mothers have to go through it in Shakespeare's plays all the time? And then I feel like as you move into his later plays, mothers become less central. And so my angry reaction kind of shifted because there weren't as many of them to be upset about how unfairly they were being treated. Yeah. And also I ended up going back to some of the very early plays at the end of my reading, and I became more enchanted with these mothers. I saw them less as victims and more as women who might have been limited in the choices that they could make, but were damn sure that people were going to listen to them about how they felt about that. And I really liked that part of it. And then in terms of how I ordered the book, they're not in the order that I read the plays, and they're not in the order that I wrote the poems. When I went to order the book, I started thinking about what are the big ideas and themes. And I had a beta reader who said, you should break this up into chunks. And I thought, okay, well, what are the chunks here? And I see all of the women in Shakespeare as kind of on this sort of road of discovery, where like a queen is an accessory to a king, and then a daughter is also defined by her relationship. A lover is a woman who has taken more equality, and a witch is a woman who is doing it on her own terms. So I see it as a movement within Shakespeare's plays, from accessory status to sort of self-knowledge and power. Also, I'd like to let everybody know that Wendy and I will be reading together at the Mattapoisett Library later this month.
Oh,
So if you're a poetry lover, come on down and see us in person.
Nice plug, beautiful plug. And make sure, Elizabeth, you leave for everybody new to you, make sure that you leave how people can find you on social media, how people can follow you, your website, etc., in case they don't already have that. Just because I'm sure you've gained a lot of new fans today from the launch. Next, we're going to move to fellow 3 Mile Harbor Press published poet M.L. Brown, Mary L. Brown.
I want to start by saying hi to Paul and Pamela. And I think I saw Michael and anyone else that I've met whom I didn't see in the gallery view. Hello, it's nice to be here. And Elizabeth, it's an honor to be a fellow 3 Mile Harbor Press poet with you. I so enjoyed your book. I had a specific question about the comic interlude that you read. I get that it's, not connected to a Shakespeare poem, and so physically you moved it on the page, but I'm wondering about the actual format in terms of the length of the lines and the shape of it on the page, how you chose that.
So for anybody who does not have the book,
Oh,
I'll pop it up here. It's actually, the book goes like this, and that poem is formatted on its side, and which I appreciate the publishing house and Pamela tolerating this this hijinks on my part. I happened to see a poem actually in 9th letter that had been formatted like this about the month before we sent it to the publisher. And I said, can we do this? Because I really wanted the poem to have that feeling of the cascade of both you're tumbling down a hill that you can't recover from, and also the kind of the experience of the pace of parenting and working and life pretty much just seems like it just runs and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and falls into a pile. So so I was really happy that it could fit on the page like this, because I think the experience of the poem was kind of mitigated by the way it would have had to be formatted if it didn't fit. And Mary is, I hope I'm going to get this right, you're the author of Call It Mist, that's correct? Yes, which was a lovely book.
Yeah, some 3 Mile Press Harbor poet on poet love. All right, we're gonna move to Roberta next.
First, Elizabeth, I'd like to thank you for a wonderful and very powerful experience of women's lives, from a maid in an Elizabethan kitchen to living during the age of Me Too. Thank you. And I'd like to thank Paul very much for making me aware of this Zoom. It just totally exceeded any expectations I may have had. My question to you is, how did the writing and the publishing of the book affect your life as a teacher, a friend, a wife, a mother, or any other category of being a woman that I'm leaving out?
Okay, so that's a great question, because my friend Amy once said to me, she might not remember saying this, but she said, I said something about how, well, I can't be writing because I have all these other things. And she said, the good work will never be done. You just have to choose to make this time for yourself, basically. Like the good work that you have to do always will take precedence over that. And as a mom, as a teacher, as a person who lives in the 21st century, there's always so many demands on your time. So for me, it really was having a dedicated writing group that made the space for this possible, because it was only once I had almost a commitment to other people that I could make the commitment to myself. And that feels very unfeminist, actually, now that I've said it out loud. I'm disappointed in myself. And I will also say that my family has been really great about knowing when I need time to work on things and I have deadlines to meet. And also, Paul and Pamela were also very patient. They wanted this book like a lot earlier than they actually got it.
Paul, do you mind if I make one more comment? Okay, I just wanted to say, Elizabeth, to me, what you presented is the epitome of feminism. Speaking as someone who marched in the 60s for women's rights, the main idea to me of feminism is the ability to choose without anyone saying, no, this is wrong, whatever you choose. And doing that is just such a really, I don't even know the right adjective, but take all the adjectives, an incredible thing to do. And kudos to you and kudos to all the people around you who supported you.
Yeah, it really, to be in community is such a wonderful place to be. And I feel very blessed to be in a bunch of different kinds of communities, both with, online friends who I've never met in person, some of whom I see here today. And I want to say thank you so much to you and people I've met specifically through poetry and people I've met in other places in my life. It's amazing to see you all here together in one place. So thank you all for coming.
All right, well, we'll open the floor up in case anybody else had questions and maybe they didn't want to use the raise hand feature. If you want to analog raise your hand and ask something, and if not, that's totally fine. We can just wind things down and thank our poet, and we're okay. I mean, that's such an enriching session of questions. Now I'll hand the floor back over in case Ganego wanted to say anything to close us out, or but if not,
Well, anybody? Well, I just want to thank Elizabeth again for a wonderful reading. Really a wonderful reading. Bravo. And thank you all for being there.
I'm not on mute or video, so.
I'd give her a standing ovation, but then you just see my belly button. My sweater.
yeah,
It was really, really wonderful. Yeah, very good.
Can we give her one more round of applause to the author?
Yeah.
Yay, Elizabeth!
A reading is nothing without an audience, so I'm going to clap you back for being such a great audience. Thank you
Very gracious.
very
It was
much.
wonderful. It did a wonderful job.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't have a ton of experience, so I appreciate that.
It was really good.
Excellent.
And please go to press.com if you don't already have it.
Yep.
Buy her book.
Yeah, buy my book.
And then get her to
Which
sign
also
it
has
whenever you see her.
a beautiful cover that was made by of a painting by Daniel Ludwig. So I always like to thank him too for sharing the amazing cover art on this, and Pamela for designing the cover.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
This has been lovely. Thank everybody for
Thanks.
Well, my only complaint was I wish it had been longer.
Thank you.
Yeah, you could have read longer.
Gotta leave you wanting more.
Yes. Or some new ones.
I had one on the side in case people were like encore. I wasn't sure.
Encore. Why not?
Let's hear that.
Encore, absolutely.
Your question.
Wait, hold on a sec.
Yeah, I think the people have spoken. The people are demanding that you do one more.
Really? Okay. All right. Let me think about this.
Hello, Sam.
Oh, you know what? I'll read one of the persona ones that this is a little bit more of a happy poem. How about that?
What page?
It is 59. It's called Audrey Reflects. Audrey's my favorite character in all of Shakespeare. She's a goat herd in As You Like It, who hates living in the forest and wants to live in the city and go to the court. And she marries the fool Touchstone, who is like a gross old man, because she's like, this is how I'm going to get out of my life and into the life that I want. So this poem is imagines her reflecting back on her life as an older woman. And she's writing about her husband Touchstone. Audrey reflects. The first time I saw his astonishment to find shit on the bottom of his shoe, I saw a passage to another realm. I couldn't read to make comparisons. Still, I knew that he could be my Virgil embodied as a fool. I never cared for looks out in the pasture anyhow. Once you've supervised the randy billies notching their conquests on the meadow gate, you know how long a nanny's worth will last. And unlike some, I had no need be told I wasn't for all markets. Getting out had never seemed a possibility. What did I know beyond goat milk, goat meat, goat turds? I knew spring in Arden Forest could not last, that those towny greenwood twits would rot and splinter in the winter cold. City fools. What fool would leave the city? They laughed at Touchstone, but he knew the truth. Fires, music, dancing, roast fowl, feather beds to sleep in. As age dwindles our powers, such memories of warmth recall us to our bodies in which we have lived so well.
Nice, nice, nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad we got the encore.
Did you get if you hang around? And now I will release everyone. And I so appreciate you all for coming and for staying.
Thank you.
Thank you.